And we're rolling. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Auth Part 2. So, by the end of this lesson, I hope that each and every one of you will be able to verify user identities in Rails, issue signed tokens to users, and differentiate between authorization and authentication. Any questions before we get started?
Are we like coding along, or is this recorded?
This is recorded. There are parts that you should code along with, and there are parts that you should not code along with, and I'll tell you which those are.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions? Cool. So first thing that we're going to do is what we did yesterday. So give us a new noun for today. What's the app that we're making?
Truck.
Truck. All right, it's going to be called Truck Stop. So first thing that I want you to do is all of the things that we did yesterday. So I want you to make a Truck Stop app. I want it to, you're going to need to install bcrypt. You're going to need to make a route to create a user. You're going to need to make a controller to create a user. You're going to need to make a user model with a secure password. You'll know that you did it correctly when you can post to that endpoint and you see a hashed password come back. So I want you to get that far on your own. I will give you, let's check in at 6 minutes. Go for it. Three minutes. Still have some time left, but I want to get a sense of where people are. Give me a fist to 5. Fist is what are we supposed to be doing? 5 is I got a password hash coming back. Show me on the screen. Cool. All right, let's give it a little bit more time.
Flannel Sheets 03. What the fuck is that?
Someone who appreciates being comfy.
Hey, I know it's important.
This is what I want people to know about me.
It's totally Capricorn at Yahoo. 6 hummingbirds at Gmail.
What do we call this? Slaughterhouse?
Truck stop.
Truck stop. Something like that. All right. So I'm going to follow the steps. All right, so I go into the gem file. I uncomment out bcrypt. I bundle install. I serve up that app. I Rails G controller users. I Rails G model user. I go over to the router, add resources for users, but solamente the create method. I go over to the controller. I make that create method. I user.create username is params username. The password comes in as params password. Once we have all that, we render it as JSON. Over in the model that we created, we say that it has secure password. And then in our migration, we add strings for username and password digest. It's password digest in the database, it's password everywhere else. Okay, so I run those migrations. Rails DB migrate, and with any luck, I should be able to make a new user. Oops, can't post users. You can't post users. Am I serving at the site? Let's see what happened. Ah, address in use. That'll do it. Let's call this Rails S port 4000. There we go. All right, I got a password digest coming back. So that's everything we did yesterday. Questions about part 1 stuff?
On your create, when you added the status, can I just see that really quick where you did the status created?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So as gnarly as that looks, one of the things that I'll do sometimes is add all the syntax back in. So render is a method that's being called, being passed a hash. One of its keys is JSON, and we are setting that equal to a hash. One of its keys is status. We're setting it to that symbol. But that's the same thing written out JavaScript style. Cool. Other questions about part 1 stuff?
In the route, is it resources users only create? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Bingo. What else? Onward. So we want to verify users' identities in Rails. So they can make an account. We need a way to find out that somebody is the person that they created an account for. So let's talk about the steps to do that. So we are going to create a login route. We're going to create a login controller and action. We're going to look up a user, and then we are going to authenticate them. So that's the first part of this, is these first 4 steps. These guys right there. So just like we did yesterday, I'd like you to watch me do this. Then you're going to coach me through doing it, and then you're going to do it yourself. So first thing I'm going to do is make a commit so I can roll back to this. Step 1 complete. Cool. Step 1, create a login route. So what I want to do here is I want to be able to post to /login, and then I want that to go to a controller called Authentication. I want it to go to its login action. So logging in is not a RESTful resource thing. So it's a completely different idea. So we can't use like resources and stuff. So we'd say, all right, if you send me a post request to log in, actually I don't think that slash is on it. If you send me a post request to log in, I would like you to route that request to a controller called Authentication's login action. All right, well I need to create that controller in action. So I can do Rails G controller authentication. Cool. And then if I go to that controller that I just made and make an action called login. Cool, done. I need to look up a user. So we'll say that the user.findBy username and we'll find the user by the username that they send us. And then we're going to authenticate them. This is the second magic thing that we got with bcrypt and has secure password. So in addition to turning passwords into password digests, we get this cool thing. You can do @user dot authenticate. And so what this is expecting is the unhashed password that they just sent us. That .authenticate method will do all of the magic of hashing the password, comparing it to the hashed password, doing the salt correctly. We don't need to do any of that stuff by hand. We can just say params password. So that .authenticate method will return true or false based on whether or not it was able to compare those hashes correctly. So we can say if, else, and. So if that works correctly, we want to render something like JSON message correct. Otherwise, we want to say something like not correct. All right, neat. So that's it. Let's see if it works. So I'm posting to users. I posted that. I got this password digest back. So I should be able to log in with this user. If I post to /authentication, no route matches post. Oh, it's because it's login. Correct. Cool. What if I got the password wrong? Not correct. Correct. What if I got the username wrong? Oh no, the whole thing blew up. Because we also need to handle a case where we couldn't find the user. So we might say something like, if not user. So if we couldn't find a user, then we might say wrong user. And then we can put this inside of there and say wrong password. As like this is like a good practice. Have your success case be the last thing. And so we could do something like if not there also. So we've got wrong thing, oops, flip these around. Wrong thing, right thing. If there's nothing else that makes sense, that's not a bad way to do it. So we end up with wrong user. Okay, what if the user's right, password's wrong? Wrong password. Cool. What if they're both right? Correct. What questions do you have about this?
So like for the username, if they're doing like different case,
Uh-huh.
how do you have it so it's right, like no matter the case?
Ooh, how would we handle that?
I'm just guessing there's like a lower function or something that we can say, or actually I don't know with since we're doing a query.
Yeah. So you could pull it out of here. This param's username, that should be the string. So if I look up, let's see, Ruby string to lower. Down case. So this is sometimes called normalization. But if you do that, And maybe you do that before you create a new user also. You just downcase their username. Then you're always comparing the same thing. But that would be a way to handle that. What else?
Is there another way to write those nested if-elses?
There is, but there isn't like a particularly Ruby way to do that.
Okay,
This is how a Rubyist would do that.
gotcha.
But like you could do this like if not user, or I think you can even use the or keyword, or not user dot authenticate params password. That should be the same. Let's see if it is. Oop. Okay, that's right. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's right. So yeah, like, yeah, that feels like vaguely Ruby-ish also. Either of those would be fine. More questions?
If you, how you did like the status created, would you be able to send off one like that says like unauthorized and authorized too?
Yep.
And you could use that to like from the front end to check if it worked.
Just like that.
Thanks. Thank you.
What else? Cool. So let's do that together. So I got all that. RM app controllers, authentication controller, and I'll blow out the test for that too. All right, so right back where we started. I want Jack. Give me a place to get started.
Adding the post route for login.
Awesome, I love it. So go over here. A post to login should go to where?
The authentication hashtag or whatever that symbol is. Login.
Indeed. Christine, give me the next step.
Create the Authenticate controller.
Good. Rails G controller authentication. Okay, very nice. Joe, give me another step.
Oh, and for the route, it's you did authenticate.
Oop.
That was going to be my next step to change that.
Nice. Cool. Joe, what am I doing next?
You could create your login action
Yep.
in the authentication controller.
Okay, very nice. Alice, what am I doing next?
You're going to do add user
Mm-hmm.
equal user.flyby, and then you will use the flyby params
Mm-hmm.
and username.
Cool. Okay, very nice. AJ, what am I doing next?
So I guess if making an if statement, so if it's not the user, we would like render like wrong user message
Okay.
through JSON.
Okay, very nice. Tyler, give me another step. Oh, you gotta unmute, Tyler. Sorry.
My bad. Yeah, so I guess you would do message correct user in the else. You could do that.
Okay. What else do I have to do?
I'm not really sure.
Okay, so we know that if they gave us a username that doesn't exist, it'll tell us wrong user. One other thing we need to check.
Password also.
Yeah, so how do I do that?
We need to create another if else statement.
Okay.
I think it goes inside of our else of our original if
Okay.
else statement.
And then what am I ifing for here?
You're gonna do another. You can do another at user find by password.
Ooh, close. So this is like our built-in magic thing. Do you remember the name of the method?
Authenticate.
Authenticate. We get that one for free. And what does authenticate take?
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Somebody help Tyler out. What's the authenticate method take?
Is that params?
Params what?
Passwords?
Yeah. So it's going to take that password in, and it'll handle all the hashing and comparison and all that kind of shit for us. We also want that to be opposite. If the user cannot authenticate with that password, wrong password. All right, so if we did that right, I get correct. Oh, correct everything. So I get to correct everything if I put the wrong username, wrong user. If I put the wrong password, wrong password. Do them both right, correct everything. And then we also found that we could do that. Call that wrong something. Same thing. We're just combining those two things into one if statement. But if I do that, correct everything, wrong something, and wrong something. So if that one's easier for you to remember, that works too. Questions?
Real quick, could you just go to the user controller for a second? Okay, sweet, thank you.
I have a question about why we create a separate authentication controller rather than putting like a login action in the user's controller.
We could. There's nothing wrong with that. There's some benefits to not having it in the user's controller. So user controller is that's a lot more appropriate, I think, for RESTful actions that we might want to take on users, such as creating them, deleting them, updating them, listing them, that kind of thing. What we're doing with this login is technically called RPC. It's an alternative to REST. It's from before it. Stands for Remote Procedure Call. And since it's technically a different architecture pattern, probably makes more sense to put it in a different controller. Good question. It'll still work if we put it in the user controller, though. What else? What else you want to know? Cool, your turn. So this one's a little bit quicker. I'm going to put 3 minutes on. See if you can get this working. You'll know that you did it right if a wrong user generates an error message, a wrong password generates an error message, and a correct user and correct password works out okay. Go for it. All right, give me a fist to 5. Fist is what we're supposed to be doing. 5 is I get the right messages coming back. Good, 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 good. All right, any new questions come up out of that?
Not a new question, but something interesting that I learned.
Okay.
I ran into an error doing if there is no user or if the authentication didn't go through. I was using the double pipes instead of or, and that was throwing it off. So then I switched it to explicitly OR or, and it worked. And then for kind of Stack Overflow post that says that the pipes have a higher precedence than or. So there's some weird situations where like the first statement might evaluate before checking the entire conditional if you use the pipes instead of or.
Weird.
Very weird. Yeah.
Ruby is such a garbo language. Don't like it. All right. Anything else? That is verifying a user's identity in Rails. The next thing that we need to do is issue them a signed token. So this is going to be their proof that they authenticated with us. So for this, we need another library. This library is called Jot. So we're going to bundle add JWT. And just watch me for right now. So yes, JWT is pronounced Jot. I'm not having a stroke. I also didn't pick that, but JWT is pronounced Jot. And I'm also going to save here. Cool. Okay, so I added the JWT library. And fairly sure I have to require it up here also. Might be wrong on that. It might auto load. All right, so if I require JWT, this is going to be in our correct case. So what we want to do is we're going to build the token. And this is whatever information that we want the user to be able to carry around with them. So that might be something like their user ID. Yeah, sure. Let's just start there. But we can put whatever we want in here. Any other data that we want to use, we can just do. Okay, so we have the token. We also want a secret key. So you get a secret key generated for you by Rails under Rails Application Secrets. And shoot, I always forget it. Wrote it down over here. Secrets.secretKeyBase. I've also seen people say that they can get it just by doing this. I'm kind of curious if that works. Let's see. Or we'll call this, not token, we'll call this payload. And then my token is going to be jwt.encode, and encode takes a payload and a secret key, and that's going to generate our token. And now, instead of saying like, yeah, you got it right, we can actually send that token back. Like that. Let's see if it worked. Yeah. Didn't like the Jot. Oh, anytime you add a new gem, you need to restart your app. Pro tip. There we go. All right, cool. So I got this token. Why? What's in this token? We can copy and paste it and go over to jwt.io. And if we paste that in there, hey, weird, look at that. It's our user ID. It's because your Jot is encoded. It's not encrypted. We talked about this yesterday. This is just pig Latin. It is taking regular old characters and base64 encoding them, which makes them teeny, teeny, tiny, so they're easy to pass around, and they have things like the user ID in them. And it is signed with, wait for it, a hash so that we can tell that somebody didn't fuck with it. But if a user has this token, in part 3, we will verify that a token is a good token and we can trust it. But for right now, that's step 2. Give me some questions.
Can you try it without the required required
Yeah.
dot? Just to see.
Sure. Yep, worked.
Sweet.
Can you break down the semantics of payload?
Yeah.
I'm seeing that.
So a payload is just a hash. I can put whatever I want in here. Might put the username also. And then if cool, let's take a look at that token. If I take that and put it into the JOT decoder, hey, there they all are. It's just a way of storing data. So I'm going to give this back to the client when they log in. And now that client has that, and they can send it back to me anytime they want to do something that requires being authenticated and not have to send me their username and password every time. So in step 3, I'll take a JOT, I'll decode it, I'll get this payload out of that, and now I can just use their user ID directly. I don't have to also have them log in.
And what's the JOT website that you're going to? Or you're doing
This is jwt.io. It's the official JOT website. If you put a token in there, it'll decode it for you.
Well, thank you.
Super helpful in debugging. What else?
Can you go back to your code? On line 14, I mean, I'm get confused between encodes and decodes all the time.
Okay.
Do you have, yeah.
So I want to take this hash and mess it up. That's encoding it. If I was taking this and so if I had that in a JOT, then I could do something like jwt.decode and give that the JOT and the secret key. And that'll give me my original payload hash. That'll turn into this. Alice, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and when you talk about payload, like is that like what? Can you explain more about
Sure.
like the payload?
Yeah. So your JOTs have 3 parts to them. So the first part is the header. The second part is the payload. And the third part is the signature. So in the header, we really care mostly about which version of JOT are we using, and how was this signed? Like some meta information. The same thing we use headers for in HTTP. The payload is data. this is any kind of data that we want the client to store and send back to us. So in our case, that's going to be who are they? And then the signature is a hash that gives us some confidence that a user didn't change their payload. Because if I give the payload back to somebody, I have this username on here. But we talked about, this is encoded. It's not encrypted. Anybody can read this. Anybody can change this. You can like change that to a 2, and now you're user 2. The thing that we want to be careful about is, all right, well, if anybody can just change their user ID and send me a JOT that has that on it instead, how do I know that they didn't fuck with it? And it's because it'll hash to something different. The signature won't match anymore. And so in step 3, we'll check for that while we're decoding. And if the hashes don't match, it'll go, alert, alert, they changed their payload. And now we know we don't have to trust it.
Hey, Kyle.
Yep.
How does it know, like this website, when you put it up there, how does it know what like your secret key is? Is that not like...
It doesn't.
It doesn't? Oh. But how does it decrypt it or encode it or decode it?
It doesn't. It can't tell whether or not this is valid.
Oh, okay. But it can still just get out the pink text, but that blue text is what it can't figure out, and that's what our Rails backend will be able to say, like, oh, that's right, that's wrong.
Right. You can.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you can put in your secret key here if you want to actually check the signature.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Kyle, could you explain what a secret key is again?
Sure.
Or like the purpose of it?
So it's going to be part of our hash. It hashes it in a particular way that's different from how your Rails app would hash it, which is different from how Joe's Rails app would hash it. And that thing that's making the difference is just some random characters. And luckily, Rails generates those for us. And so we can use this secret key base as like a starting place. But you could just as easily make that and like that'll work too. But Rails will generate one that's just a bunch of random characters.
So it's just unique to the application, not the user?
Correct, exactly.
Okay.
And so if somebody has that, then they can start spoofing your tokens. They can change their user ID to 2 and then re-encode that JOT and re-sign it if they have your secret key. And now they can like actually pretend to be you or anyone. So don't let somebody have your secret key. Cool. More questions? All right, your turn. So as a reminder, you need to install JOT. You need to make a payload. You need to get your key, and you need to encode your payload and your key into a token and send that back. That's what we're doing. 3 minutes, go for it. Okay, pencils down. So, give me some data. Fist to 5 again. Fist is what are we doing? 5 is I got a token back. Beautiful, beautiful. Cool. If you're not a 5, we can chat afterward. The correct code looks at least something kind of like this. And that's step 2. So we can create users now, and we can verify that an existing user is who they say they are. Pretty darn cool. Step 3 is going to be when somebody sends us one of those tokens, how do we say that, okay, cool, you sent me a good token, you can do the thing that you wanted to do, or no, that's not a good token, you can't do that. We're going to protect resources with tokens. And that is Auth. So give me some last questions. What do we got?
Is a payload required?
Like for this to be useful, yes. Because what's going to happen is they're going to send us that token, and we're going to take, for example, their user ID out and then look up their user that way. If we don't have a payload, then they essentially need to send us their username and password and like all that shit again, and then we're just logging them in. The point of this is that that token ends up taking the place of the username and password. So I have to have some way that I can look them up. Could be the user ID, could be the username. Like that part doesn't matter that much, but it needs to be some way I can look them up.
Hey Kyle, for token usage, so if someone's like posting a comment on like a message thread, they're gonna have to send their token with that?
Yes.
Or like what's the process?
Exactly. So the client's going to send that token with every request that they make, and I can look at that token whenever I want to make sure that it's okay.
And to make sure it's okay, do you just decode it?
That's part 3.
Part 3. Oh, perfect.
Cool. Other questions?
So since the token is generated from encoding a payload, the token would only be unique if the payloads were different.
Yes. Yes. So like, if I have the exact same payload generated by the same app, yeah, those tokens would be identical. It's like fairly common to put like issued at times in milliseconds, and so like that would prevent pretty much any of your tokens from being the same. Because like a token's valuable. A token is proof that you are who you say you are. It's like a valet key. If somebody takes your valet key, they can drive your car. So you want to protect your tokens carefully. Cool. What else? So what we're going to start with tomorrow, just like we did today, I'm going to have you do all of part 1, then I'm going to have you do all of part 2, and then we'll talk about how we make sure that these tokens are good to go. So thank you all very much. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Kyle. It was really helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.